Hello and welcome to another episode of Virtue and Virtuosity. And today I'm joined by Craig Hogan. Craig has done some really interesting things within the not-for-profit sector, particularly around hackathons, but he's also worked in CTO type roles within the private corporate sector. Craig, really good to speak to you today.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm Craig Hogan. I have spent the last couple of decades in tech. My background generally is as a contractor or startup founder, I guess, and startup developer. Most of the last kind of decade or so has been spent building or helping companies build teams, whether that's making more processes, which is something I guess 20 years ago I never ever thought I would be doing because I was never a big fan of getting processes in place, but now that's pretty much the bulk of what I do. I've worked for charities. I've worked for companies that help charities. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, I also ran a series of hackathons in London under the banner of Dev for Good, which was a weekend-long hack where we would invite charities, not-for-profits, along to bring up their real-world problems for a bunch of developers, designers, sort of anyone who was interested really, to see if they could solve those problems in a weekend. And we had lots of caffeinated drinks, lots of pizza, and people sort of got on with it. I don't think anything was groundbreaking, but there were always interesting ways of solving problems with tech for the charities, which is sort of how we met originally. Through your work with Shelter. Yeah, it's been a long road from those hackathons to now I'm an engineering manager at a fintech company. So yeah, lots has happened, but still circling around those people and processes and code.
What was most groundbreaking for me was actually the idea of actually having a hackathon, because it was the type of thing we talked about internally quite a bit, but had never quite got to. I expected going into it that we would come up with some amazing ideas, we would build something, and at the end of it we would have created something in 2 days which no one had ever managed before. I think you were slightly more realistic in your ambitions of what could happen in a hackathon.
Maybe. I think the first one I definitely had exactly the same expectations. I thought I'll bring together 30, 40, 50 really smart people who can write code and who solve problems for a living. I'll give them a real world problem, and 2 days later we would have solved that real world problem. That's obviously going to be really easy to do. It turned out it wasn't quite that easy. What we ended up finding is I think we did around 5 events altogether. The thing that we came out with was we weren't going to solve the problem, but we'd probably give the charities or the organizations who came to us, we would be able to give them a list of ways to not do it. So it was sort of the opposite of here's a solution that you can take back to the office. It was more, here's an idea that we got working, but here's a really long list of the things that didn't work to get us to this point. So I guess we would, in the end, saving the charities that wasted R&D time that normally happens whenever you sort of come up with a new solution to a problem, is you spend lots of time finding the things that don't work. We had 30, 40, 50, 60 people all doing that over 2 days. And some of the things that came out were really interesting ideas, but they were nowhere near ready for production.
Yeah, and I think how I'd summarize it is hackathons are much more about the journey than the destination. That the process you go through in the hackathon teaches you an awful lot. But if you expect you're going to come up with a polished, finished product at the end of it, I think you're probably overly optimistic.
I agree completely. There's something really inspiring about getting a group of people who've never met before, and as you said, from all different backgrounds, sitting around a table with what could be a stereotypical kind of customer request on the back of a serviette that says our problem statement is, and there's like 4 lines of text, and that's all they've got to go on. They might have a video from the charity, they might have a representative they can chat to, but effectively they're all sitting there with their own ideas. And the brainstorming that happens in that first 2 or 3 hours is really exciting to watch, because it starts off with one person doing the talking, because there's always a person who wants to talk the most. And then after a while, everybody gets involved and everyone has their own experiences, their own emotions, their own feelings about what's being built. And the thing that comes up out of that is this really solid group of people with a single fixed focus. And it was the reason why I really enjoyed doing the hackathons. I should probably be saying I really enjoyed helping the charities out and getting those sorts of things sort of move forward. But actually, for me, being there, watching those people come together is something it's quite special, really. Just seeing smart people work together and have arguments and disagreements, but then at the end of it, the arguments and agreements happen for the right reason. And I've just found it really cool.
So Craig, what I find interesting about what you're saying there is that you told me when we talked earlier, you said so often where you were working, you'd find that people come to you with problems that presented as tech problems, but nearly always these problems were people and process type problems. And what you just said about hackathons there as well was very similar in terms of what you got from those hackathons. It was about the people you were working on and about the idea generation, and that was what really became quite exciting.
Yeah, for me, I guess that's why I've ended up doing a lot more people engineering. I don't know if that's a term, but that's kind of feels like a lot of what I end up doing. It's not about manipulating or any of those sorts of things. It's just about giving people the right tools to do engineering, give them the right processes. And when you have a hackathon, the time constraints are so short that there's no mental time to waste. So the focus is very, very sort of laser focused on getting to the end and getting something done. And people naturally fall into a feedback process. And I guess it's what we use for agile and things now, where someone does something, they ask for feedback. If it's good, they carry on. If it's bad, they change it. There's no personal emotions involved. It's just, is it good? Yes or no? Carry on. And in businesses, everything has to follow a very, very simple process from start to finish. If it gets too complicated, you end up wasting time. And I don't know what it was like for you when you were at Shelter or with the charities you've worked with since, how that fits in now, sort of in modern charities.
Well, I think what's interesting there is that there's a word customer, which when you look at charities and then you compare them to more commercial organizations, trying to understand what customer means is a very interesting thing, because in the charity sector, uh, pretty much you have a customer who is someone who is a supporter, and that supporter is giving you money or supporting your cause in some way. Perhaps um, they're going to an event or taking part in a marathon or something like that. But then there's also a customer, as in the person you're helping, your beneficiary, and depends on whether you're a medical charity or an animal charity even, or a service delivery charity. The income is in many ways disconnected from the customer that you're working with, the person that you're trying to provide the great service to. And I often wonder if that disconnect causes that lack of focus there.
Whenever I build software for a company or I sit down with a product owner and talk about what we're going to build, they always have an idea of who their, that target customer is. They know the age, they know where they live, they know what they do for a living. Personas are always set down. These are the people we're targeting. So the marketing team know who they're going to target. The product owner knows what the tech needs to do to fulfill that targeting of that particular person. And everybody knows end to end that the money spent on this bit of the tech is expected to make that customer spend this much money, for example. And sometimes it's not the software that is needed, it's just a better process, or maybe trying different sorts of marketing or different ways of getting the money in, rather than just assuming tech is going to solve the problems. Because in corporate or in big companies, generally you build tech to solve the problem.
I like that. So in corporate, you build tech to solve a problem. I think in charities, I think you would say that is a common area. You build tech to solve problems in charities. I think one other thing I just want to touch on here is where when charities they feel they don't want to take risks because there's a desire for stability in both your income and your expenditure when you're in a charity. You don't want your expenditure to shoot up massively, and the income, you're keen that it doesn't drop. Obviously, you love your income to shoot up, but generally in the actions you do, you're trying to mitigate the risk that income falls or expenditure goes up rapidly. And what that ends up doing is it constrains thinking and constrains charities from taking too many risks around their technology. And there's less of a focus on how could we make this big leap forward? How could we radically improve? And you find yourself more in the world of incremental improvements. I don't know. You talked a lot about how you've worked with startups, or when I've spoken to you before, where they're in a world of wanting to scale massively quickly, and radically improve and working through a process. Is anything I'm saying there making any sense or chiming with you?
When we talked briefly last week, that concept of from a charity perspective of staying stable, and I hadn't considered that working repetition is the norm. So if I worked in a tech team within kind of a charity, first thing I'd want to do is be like, right, where's the innovation? And I would bring out the innovation stick and I'll be like, all right, let's make changes, because if we change that, that'll be far more efficient and it'll save us lots of money. But the knock-on effect is everyone else around me is thinking, oh, if we change that, we might not get the same amount of money in. And from a corporate perspective, I mean, and all the companies I've worked in for the last, for quite a long time, is innovation is always thing, because you want to be in a better position than your competitors. You want to have the next best thing. I mean, I guess at the moment it's generative AI, or AI in particular. Everyone wants to have the next thing so that they're one step ahead of their competitors. So they're spending money to create something new, and all of the old stuff instantly becomes legacy, because they want to move ahead as quick as possible to beat everybody else to that next sale or the next customer.
What you just said about use of Gen AI within startups, within companies, and looking at their competitors, that's really interesting, because I speak to a lot of charities and look at how they're using AI, or that some of their ideas around AI, what they want to do on Gen AI. But there's simply no idea that, oh, well, we'd like to really take a huge leap forward with Gen AI because it will allow us to get ahead of a competitor charity. That simply doesn't exist. I think the reason that charities would want to use AI would be to make themselves more efficient internally, and to make it so as they could more effectively serve their beneficiaries. But there's no element of competition there, and which means that you've got no one you're running against. So if you're trying to work out how do we make ourselves better for our beneficiaries, you're only judging yourself against what you actually do, rather than judging yourself against 5 other competitors and say, how can we get better than these 5 other competitors in the way that they deliver that. I think, sorry, I'm talking quite a bit here, but you've placed some thoughts in my head that I think what might be really interesting for some of our charity tech teams is to actually try to put themselves in more of a competitive environment and work against each other in a hackathon type event, which is where we started this, to say let's actually try and compete and actually see if we can actually beat each other at certain things, and work to try and push ourselves forward, because it's just not the way that we think within charities.
Yeah, and I think I would love to have a charity hackathon that had engineering teams from different charities trying to solve, even if it was a generic problem that all of the charity teams had, internal or external, it wouldn't really matter. But I think it would be really good for them to, I think compete might be the wrong word, but it would become a competition to work on, a single problem together, even if they mixed the teams up or they sort of did whatever they needed to do. But just to allow everyone to get that innovation time to think, we don't normally get time to fix these sorts of problems. So let's, work with as many people as possible to try and work out, even if they do the same as we said at the start, of work to find the ways to not do it. at least then it gives them a chance to compete and see how far can we push this idea, whatever it might be. I think that the technical teams and the charities, if they have the opportunity to get involved in, I'm just saying hack events because we've talked about it, but there's lots of other sorts of events that they can get involved in, to give them an idea of what is possible. Because I think if you've worked in the charity sector or the not-for-profit sector for a long time, I think it would be very easy to lose some ideas of what's possible out there. And we've talked about AI and Gen AI briefly, but those sorts of things that I'm sure people are talking about. But I would say to those tech leadership teams, actually go out and find companies that are doing really interesting things with Gen AI or with different types of AI, and actually go and meet them and see what they're doing. You obviously won't be able to steal anything. I'm sure there'll be loads of things that you need to do, but just go to events and talk to people who are involved in that cutting edge tech. You might not get to use it in the charity that you're working in, but if your team can see that you're interested and you're going out to find out about those things, they will get interested and excited. And they will start coming up with ideas. And although all of those ideas will probably stay within an R&D cycle within the charity, it only takes one of them to come to fruition within the charity, and it could revolutionize the way processes might be held, or how people work within the charity. Or, as you said, Stuart, they might be able to help the actual end client. The person who needs the help the most might get something because of a chance meeting between a tech leader at a networking event talking about green tech that uses AI, or whatever those links are. But those interactions with people outside the charity sector, I think, are really important.
I like that. So I'm going to rephrase what you just said, because it gives me a practical idea which I can put out there as a challenge to some of the charities that listen to this. So I think what could help there is corporate partnerships could be viewed in a different way. So often with corporate partnerships where you're trying to share skills, the way that works is you will have a corporate partner who has a great big technology team, hundreds of people. And what they do is they send some of their technology people over to the charity to talk to the charity, understand what the charity is doing, and then suggest ways they can do it better. And I've been involved in a few of those. And the corporate partner, they quite enjoy it because they get to find out all about the operating model of the charity and find out a little bit more about all the things they do, which they find really fulfilling. The charity gets a little bit stuck because they say, I'm not really sure if those guys really understood what we were doing. If you flip it around the other way, what you then end up with is the charity technology people going over to the large corporate, and saying, let's just see how you do stuff. And then they get to sit there and see, I don't know, how do you do your product development? How do you do your business analysis? How do you do your business cases? How do you do a variety of different things there? And I think that would be, if you're a corporate partner who wants to offer something, that would be really valuable to offer, to be open and transparent with a charity and say, listen, we'll let some of your tech product teams, your digital developers, whoever it is, come into our organization and just sit and watch and be involved in a few things and see how we do it, and you can learn from us. I think that would be really valuable.
I agree 100%, and that is kind of the ethos that sits underneath the hackathons. Is lots of people coming together from different backgrounds. There could be cultural backgrounds, there could be tech backgrounds, career backgrounds, but they all have a different way of doing things. And when you sit in those groups of people, you only need to pick up one or two snippets of information about how somebody else does work to take back to your job. So I think that corporate piece would be amazing. It's not just about saying, we've done our CSR, look, we're helping a charity. It's really about sharing that knowledge across both sides. And the charities can help the corporate teams as well. It's not a one-way conversation. There should be just a two-way conversation for finding better ways of working.
So if we've got people involved in corporate partnerships who listen to this podcast, or indeed you're working in a corporate sector organization, what would be really useful would be just to invite some charity people in, and rather than you guys being, okay, we can solve your problems, actually just let those charity guys see how you solve your own problems. And I think there's a lot that could be learned from there. Thank you, Craig. That was really good. I love that. I always like it when we get to a really good takeaway from a podcast episode. Craig, it's been fantastic having you on today. Thank you for giving up some time, and I really wish you well with your current work.
Thank you very much, Stuart.
Brilliant. Thank you.